Good evening and welcome again to the Canadian Orthodox Broadcasting System and the Canadian Orthodox Monastery of All Saints of North America. Tonight, continuing our discussions, the Old Testament is about you. We touched a little on the reign of King Solomon, who, for all of his wisdom, toward the end, made love to women from every nation anywhere near Israel, including those whom God had forbidden Israeli men to become involved with. Now, for all of his wisdom and obedience to God and being chosen to build the temple, he nevertheless could succumb to his lust for strange women, other than his wife. And this is a weakness that a lot of men have. Perhaps not everyone commits exactly the same folly, but are tempted often enough to do it or think about it. Now, in our own time, one of the biggest problems facing marriages is that so many men become addicted to online or internet pornography. I suppose that's similar to what Solomon did. We commit all these sins in our mind, even though, of course, Solomon, being a king and being very rich, could afford to actually do it. Most of the people watching this video are not nearly wealthy enough to be able to do that. I sometimes think of it as the king's disease, because kings could have any woman they wanted, as many women as they wanted, and all this, and take no thought for their wife, and take no thought for their relationship with God. It happened throughout history. But people who are addicted to internet pornography are doing exactly the same thing. And consequently, the life of King Solomon, his fall, is a story about you. It's a story about all of us, the possibilities that are there before us. But any of you watching this video who have become attached to or addicted to internet pornography, then you see how King Solomon's folly, the story from the Old Testament, is really your story. It's really about you, and about your building a wall of separation between yourself and God, as you build a wall of separation between yourself and your wife. So that's the life of King Solomon. And when Solomon died, King Ieroboam, his son Ieroboam, became the next king. And here again is another story that we can recognize told century after century in so many different ways. Ieroboam was approached by the people of the 10 tribes. The 10 tribes were called Israel. The 2 tribes, Judah and Benjamin, were to the south. There was always a little bit of a division between these groups. And taxation had been especially high during Solomon's reign because he was building the temple. And of course, being a king, he was also building more than one palace for himself and a special house for his wife to live in and so forth. So this tax burden had become extremely difficult to people. And they also did not want quite the rigidity and strictness with which they'd been governed. So they got together with Rehoboam, and who had been in exile in Egypt and come back after the death of Solomon, and went to petition King Ieroboam, to lighten these burdens, lighten up on the tax and the levies of forced labor, whatever, anything that was really becoming such a burden that was intolerable. And the wiser, older counselors told him, well, okay, do it. The temple's built. You don't need such heavy taxes anymore. Your father left you a beautiful palace. Lighten up. You don't press this issue. But then some of the younger firebrands around him told him, well, go at them with a whip and a sword for disobedience and disrespect. Um, and that's what he did, of course. And because of that, Israel was split forever. The 10 tribes separated. Ieroboam was left only with Judea, the tribe of Benjamin and Judah. And Rehoboam was made the king of the 10 tribes of Israel. And somehow it reminds me of, say, Bloody Sunday in Russia, when the workers worked almost to death for a salary that sometimes was below the living salary. Together with clergy and others, approached the Tsar, only to beg for his help in making life actually livable for them. And instead of being able to petition the Tsar, they were met with Cossack soldiers who began to shoot them all dead. And that, of course, was the final straw that made the communist revolution absolutely inevitable. Never mind that it was secret police chief Protopopov who was probably responsible for the outrages, but nevertheless, this is the sort of thing that happens. Now, we don't have neither enough power or position or anything to create this kind of havoc. But we do have the ability not to listen to people when they ask us or suggest to us ways that we could interact with other human beings in a more humane and kinder and better and even more Christian manner. And this is perhaps how the story is about us as individuals who are not kings or emperors. We indeed sometimes are too harsh, too demanding, too brutal even with other people. It might be at work, it might be if you're a boss or a supervisor that you're making life really difficult or impossible for some of the people who work with you or for you. If you're a parent, perhaps you don't deal with your children in as loving a manner as you should, trying to teach them rather than simply trying to demand obedience without instructing them or telling them what this is all about and what life is all about. Priests and bishops do the same thing. I've known bishops who thought the best way to rule their diocese was to rule as Ivan the Terrible would, to keep the priest in a state of terror. And priests who tried to bully or control or manipulate their parishioners. All of this is the same thing that ultimately that Ieroboam was doing, and that caused a split, a division, and broke the house of God, Israel, into two. As we know, the northern tribes eventually vanished, and we don't know exactly where they are, but they vanished someplace. So Israel was really destroyed, and the destruction of it began with Jeroboam's unreasonableness, his unwillingness to listen and heed the petitions of the people and lighten their burden or their load. In a way, he was similar to Pharaoh in Egypt and what Pharaoh had done to the Israelites, the Hebrews in Egypt. And we have to think about these stories when we read them. I know preachers preach sermons on them sometimes. They talk about mostly about the Old Testament law, and fundamentalist ministers are very fond of talking about the things in the Old Testament give us permission to hurt, destroy, or kill somebody, and teach and preach unmitigated hatred and malice. I remember when America, as Americans knew it, was going to be totally destroyed and come to an end because blacks and whites were getting married. This interracial marriage was going to destroy the country because, after all, you know, black people are not quite humans. This sort of thing was preached from pulpits in America. We've had just as bad here in Canada, of course. And this kind of reading of the Old Testament, putting it in an abstract, so that the stories and details are about somebody else, but not about you, that's no good. The Old Testament is about all of us. And the details, the stories in the Old Testament are about each and every one of us.